Did you know that roughly 30% of American Christians believe in the rapture, the doctrine that suggests believers will be taken up to heaven before a period of tribulation on earth? Globally, this belief is held by about 25% of Christians. This raises intriguing questions about how these beliefs shape individuals' views on current events and their sense of urgency in addressing global issues. How does anticipating a dramatic, end-times event influence one's approach to everyday challenges and societal responsibilities? The rapture is a concept in Christian eschatology, the study of end-time events, that envisions a dramatic event where true believers are suddenly and miraculously taken up to heaven, leaving the rest of humanity to face a period of intense tribulation and turmoil on earth. This idea is deeply rooted in interpretations of biblical passages, particularly from 1 Thessalonians 4 verses 16 to 17 and Revelation. The significance of the rapture lies in its promise of deliverance and salvation for the faithful, offering a sense of hope and assurance amid the uncertainties and trials of the world. For many believers, the rapture represents not only a profound spiritual truth, but also a comforting escape from the predicted suffering that will precede the second coming of Christ and the ultimate establishment of God's kingdom. The concept resonates strongly because it provides a vivid, hopeful narrative that contrasts sharply with the often chaotic and troubling realities of life, making it a compelling and reassuring element of Christian faith for those who embrace it. Skepticism surrounding the rapture is rooted in various misconceptions and criticisms that challenge its theological and scriptural foundations. Here are some key points of contention. 1. Biblical basis. Critics argue that the rapture is not explicitly detailed in the Bible, but is derived from interpretations of a few passages, such as 1 Thessalonians 4 verses 16 to 17 and Revelation. Many theologians and scholars suggest that these passages have been interpreted out of context or misunderstood, questioning whether the rapture is a legitimate biblical doctrine or a modern invention. 2. Historical context. The concept of the rapture as it's understood today largely emerged in the 19th century through the teachings of John Nelson Darby and the Plymouth Brethren. Prior to this, most Christian traditions did not emphasize a separate rapture event, but rather focused on the second coming of Christ and the final judgment. This historical perspective raises questions about the rapture's legitimacy as a traditional Christian belief. 3. Interpretation variability. The rapture theory relies heavily on a particular interpretation of biblical prophecy known as premillennial dispensationalism. However, many Christian denominations and theologians adhere to different eschatological frameworks, such as amillennialism or postmillennialism, which do not include the rapture. This diversity in interpretation leads to debates about which eschatological view is most biblically accurate. 4. Practical concerns. Some critics argue that a focus on the rapture can lead to escapism or a lack of engagement with social and environmental issues. They contend that if believers are preoccupied with the anticipation of being taken up to heaven, they might neglect their responsibilities to address pressing global problems and work toward improving the world. 5. Predictive failures. Historically, numerous predictions about the timing of the rapture and the end of the world have failed to materialize, leading to disillusionment and skepticism among both believers and non-believers. These failed predictions contribute to doubts about the rapture's validity and reliability as a doctrine. Discussion on the rapture, biblical, theological, and historical perspectives. Biblical references. The rapture is a concept rooted in Scripture, with supporters pointing to passages like 1 Thessalonians 4 verses 16 to 17, which describes believers being caught up to meet the Lord in the air. Many see this as a direct reference to the rapture. However, others argue that this interpretation might be too literal and suggest that the imagery could be symbolic rather than a literal prediction of future events. Another key scripture is John 14 verses 1 to 3, where Jesus promises to prepare a place for his followers and return to bring them to be with him. Some view this as evidence of the rapture, while others believe it refers more broadly to the final resurrection and the ultimate union with Christ, rather than a specific pre-tribulation event. Matthew 24 verses 40 to 42, which describes two people in a field where one is taken and the other left, is also often cited as a reference to the rapture. However, this passage could also be interpreted as a parable about being prepared and vigilant, rather than a prophecy of the rapture. Theological interpretations. The rapture's acceptance largely depends on the theological framework used to interpret it. Premillennial dispensationalism, which became popular in the 19th century through figures like John Nelson Darby, incorporates the rapture into a broader timeline of end-time events, suggesting it will occur before a 7-year tribulation period, followed by Christ's return. Critics, however, argue that this view is a relatively modern interpretation and not necessarily the only or most accurate way to understand biblical prophecy. Could there be alternative theological interpretations that provide a different perspective on these passages? Literal interpretation is central to belief in the rapture. Many adherents argue that biblical descriptions of end-time events should be taken at face value. However, others suggest that a more metaphorical approach might offer a deeper understanding. For example, the imagery of being caught up might represent spiritual elevation or transformation rather than a physical event. Historical context. The modern concept of the rapture took shape in the 19th century, heavily influenced by John Nelson Darby and the Scofield Reference Bible. This historical development raises questions about whether the rapture is a timeless doctrine or a response to the specific cultural and historical challenges of that era. Some argue that the rapture doctrine emerged as a reflection of the concerns of its time, rather than as a fundamental Christian truth. Earlier Christian traditions did not emphasize a separate rapture event, focusing instead on the second coming and the final judgment. This historical perspective suggests that the rapture might be a more recent and potentially less central belief within Christian eschatology. Tying the rapture to current events. One of the most compelling arguments for the rapture is its role in helping believers cope with global crises and personal uncertainties. In an era marked by geopolitical tensions, natural disasters, and social upheavals, the rapture provides a powerful sense of hope and reassurance. For many, the anticipation of the rapture is not just a future promise but a way to make sense of the present chaos. It serves as an emotional anchor, offering the belief that amidst the turmoil, there is a divine plan ensuring salvation and deliverance. The rapture, a source of hope amid crisis. The rapture offers a powerful source of comfort, especially during times of global crisis. Whether it's natural disasters, political instability, or pandemics. For those who believe in it, these events can be seen as signs of an approaching tribulation, reinforcing the idea that the rapture is near. This belief provides a sense of escape from the suffering and chaos, framing these crises as part of a larger, divinely orchestrated plan. Intellectual peak. Belief meets reality. The rapture doesn't just offer emotional comfort. It gives believers a sense of purpose and urgency. By seeing current events as part of a divine plan, believers are encouraged to live in alignment with their spiritual values, knowing that divine intervention could be imminent. On a deeper level, the rapture highlights the tension between the chaos of the world and the hope for divine deliverance. It provides a comforting narrative in the face of an uncertain reality, turning fear into anticipation and despair into hope, offering emotional and spiritual balance. Connecting belief to reality. For many, the rapture is more than a theological idea. It's a belief that deeply influences their daily lives. It shapes how they perceive and respond to the challenges of the world, acting as a bridge between their spiritual beliefs and the reality they live in. The rapture offers a way to see suffering and adversity as signs of a promised resolution and ultimate redemption. Why the rapture makes sense. 1. Biblical foundations. Scriptures like 1 Thessalonians 4 verses 16 to 17, John 14 verses 1 to 3, and Revelation 3 verse 10 are key in supporting the rapture. These passages provide a textual basis, describing believers being taken up to meet the Lord. 2. Theological framework. The rapture is central to premillennial dispensationalism, a theological system that places it within a specific timeline of end-time events, influencing modern Christian thought. 3. Historical context. While the rapture concept gained popularity in the 19th century, its roots can be traced back to earlier interpretations of Scripture. Its historical development highlights its impact on contemporary theology. 4. Emotional and spiritual relevance. The rapture offers hope and reassurance during global crises and personal uncertainties. It helps believers interpret current events as part of a divine plan, turning fear into comfort. 5. Intellectual perspective. The rapture connects spiritual beliefs with the reality of turbulent times, helping believers find meaning and purpose amidst uncertainty. Addressing doubts. A scriptural interpretation. While some argue that the rapture's scriptural basis is open to interpretation, proponents maintain that, through a literal lens, these passages provide a consistent vision of end-time events. A historical novelty. Although the modern understanding of the rapture is relatively new, its roots in earlier Christian thought lend it credibility within its theological context. Practical concerns. Some worry that focusing on the rapture might lead to disengagement from worldly issues. However, many believers see it as motivation to actively live out their faith while maintaining hope. The rapture makes sense when viewed through biblical, theological, and historical lenses, providing believers with hope and clarity in a complex world. While doubts exist, understanding the rapture's role in offering spiritual comfort and its place in Christian teachings helps address these concerns. God bless you.